Good morning, everyone. My name is Tamika Daniel, and I'm the Behavioral Health Community Organizer with Greater Richmond Scan. I'm also a mother to four children, and I live in the East End community. My job with Greater Richmond Scan basically entails what I'll be getting into today. They were trying to figure out how to bring their knowledge of trauma and resilience and ACEs to lower income communities and neighborhoods. And what better way to do that than someone who lives there and serves in that community? So I'm going to get started. Feel free to chime in. I will have a lot of questions and you can respond in the chat section. So this is a basic introduction to trauma and resilience in my own words. When you hear the word trauma, what is the first thing that comes to mind? Feel free to chime in. Alexis,
Hi,
yes.
I'm trying to participate in the chat, but it's saying that it's been disabled by the chat or the group administrator.
One moment, I will check on that.
Thank you so much.
And Alexis, can you let me know if anyone responded?
Yes, so we had a lot of great responses. So we had an adverse experience, pain, experiences that are not in your control, a tough situation, the feeling that is left behind after a bad experience, the impact of a traumatic event, disruption, negative painful experience or situations, emotional and or physical pain and hurt. It could be sudden or long lasting, hurtful experience with long lasting effects.
So yes, all good answers. I'm going to be honest with everyone. Before I got into this work, when I heard the word trauma, I automatically assumed medical emergency. That was all I knew about trauma is, you know, a physical injury to oneself. But as I got into this work, I realized it was much deeper than that. And the definition that I chose to go with is individual trauma results from an event, series of events, or set of circumstances that is experienced by an individual as physically or emotionally harmful or life threatening, and that has lasting adverse effects on the individual's functioning and mental, physical, social, emotional, or spiritual well being. And that's SAMHSA's definition. And what I particularly like to pay attention to in this definition is the word individual. The E's are highlighted, but I'm more so focused on individual because each individual's experience and effects that it has on someone is going to be different. You could be in the same household, you can experience the same event with 10 people and not everyone's experience is going to be different. Some may have long lasting effects and some may be okay. So I just like to particularly pay attention to individual. I grew up with four siblings and I know not all of us experienced and went through the same thing. I'm the only one with children. And even though we witnessed some of the same things, it's like we all of the effects on each one of us are different, and you will never guess that we witnessed the same things or lived in the same household for 16 plus years. So I just want to particularly pay attention to individual. And going forward, what are some examples that come to mind when you guys think of trauma? And as responses come in, Alexis, can you read them to me?
I will.
Okay.
So we have seeing violence and death, abuse. Abuse was coming in a few times. Neglect.
Mhm. So all of those are correct. All of these are potentially traumatic events. As I stated before, I had no idea that all of these things could be included in traumatic events. I know growing up in a lot of our households and cultures, some of these things on this list are just considered the normal. It's never even thought of to be traumatic or to have any effects on any of us. And we think everything that we're doing and decisions that we're making going forward are just normal. But the community slash domestic violence, the emotional abuse, physical or emotional neglect, and bullying in particular. I know a lot of people can relate to that. I was bullied a lot coming up for being tall and skinny, and I never knew that it could be side effects from being bullied. Like I just thought that was the norm. I was a child, and that's what children do. So though these are some of the potentially traumatic events that people can experience in their lifetime. And my next slide is going to be a case study. After I read this case study, I want you guys to kind of like pick it apart. We're going to pick it apart as we continue to go through the rest of this training and see how it relates to what I'm saying. And at the end, I just want you guys to kind of think of what you think happened to this individual. I was given permission to share this story from one of the parents that I came into contact with. So just listen to this case study and just sit with it and think about it throughout the rest of this training. Shelly Smith grew up in a two-parent home with three younger siblings in one of the worst parts of Richmond, Virginia. Drug and alcohol abuse and violence were a part of everyday life in the neighborhood she lived in. She witnessed domestic violence and incarceration of family members on a consistent basis. By the time she was 17, she became pregnant with her first child. She moved on her own to probably the worst public housing projects in the city, and the cycle from her childhood repeated itself in her adult life. She had two children by the age of 20. However, instead of witnessing domestic violence, she became a victim and subjected her own children to that same trauma. Even after nearly losing her life at the hands of her abuser, she went on to have another child with him. Eventually, she left him, but got into another relationship with an emotionally abusive man and had two children with him. Now she is a single mother of five children. What do you think happened to Shelly Smith? And you can feel free to chime in. Are there any responses, Alexis?
Not yet.
Okay. Well, you guys can continue to think about that case study and just sit with it as I move on to the next slide. ACEs, Adverse Childhood Experiences Study. I know I never heard of this study before, and I was like, what is this? And upon learning more about it, I realized it's things that probably each and every one of us has experienced at least not once or more in our life. And now I finally had a name to it. However, ACEs was a study done in the 1990s. It was done on about 17,000 people. About half were female. 74.8% were white. The average age was 57, and 75.2% had attended college. So the questions that were asked were basically questions about who had experienced anything in the second bullet point: and emotional abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional neglect, physical neglect, mother treated violently, household substance abuse, household mental illness, and parents separated or divorced. And for each question that they answered yes, they were given a point. And of getting their results, they realized that over 60% of children are exposed to some type of adverse childhood experience. More than 1 in 5 are exposed to 3 or more adverse childhood experiences. And I wanted to dig a little deeper to find out why this study even came about. And I realized that it started in a obese clinic. They noticed that a lot of their clients were losing weight. They lost it, but eventually they put it back on. So they were trying to understand why is it that they were losing this weight but couldn't keep it off. And upon asking questions, one of the doctors misspoke one of his questions, and the answer that he received gave him the impression and led him to believe that most of the clients were putting the weight back on as a protective mechanism to feel less attractive, because most of them had experienced some type of physical or sexual abuse. And this was their way of protecting themselves. So that's what led them to do this national study of 17,000 adults. And I found that really interesting. And it also explains the correlation between mental and physical health and ACEs scores. And what I thought for a long time was just bad decisions on everybody's part was basically, no, they were having lasting effects from things that they experienced as younger children and in their adult years. And one of the things that I particularly see and what I've seen in my case study that I read to you guys was the adoption of health risk behaviors. The sexual engagements, the being in domestic violence relationships and things of that nature. And me reading my case study, what are some of the ACEs that Shelly encountered?
Do you want us to talk it out to you or just type it in the chat, Tamika?
You guys can talk.
Okay.
Because I can't see.
I understand. Domestic violence was one that really stood out to me, a theme in Shelly's story.
I think the social emotional component as well. And then we had someone who said adverse childhood experiences and poverty.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
I think I heard alcoholism in the household as a child.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And leading to my next slide, this slide shows how trauma impacts brain development. This slide is a picture of a normal 3-year-old child's brain and one of a child going through extreme neglect. I show this slide to show people that trauma can really have significant impacts on someone at this young age. And when I was coming up, I didn't even think that a 3-year-old would remember anything that they went through. So to see firsthand that a child this young could really have impacts from the things that they were experiencing, it really opened my eyes to what I put in my children's life and what I subject them to. But even with this is not end all be all. A child can experience extreme neglect, but it doesn't have to be lasting with that child. The hurt child's brain. The brain is operating at a level of survival primary concern is getting needs met, accomplished through inappropriate behavior most of the time, behavior triggered by a child's sense of fear. Providers and parents think fear-based outbursts are acts of willful disobedience. So when you think about these things and some of the behaviors that you may have seen, what are some things that you think children may be protecting themselves from?
I would say abuse at home.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the things, even with finding or hoarding food from school, just for those food insecurities.
Mm-hmm.
It could be things that they've seen, even if it's not directly something that that's happening to them.
I know for me, I'm going to be a little transparent. As a parent, I really had to pay close attention to this. I still live in a Fairfield housing project, and my daughter, she has adapted to gunshots, as where a normal person, my daughter's normal, but the average adult or child that hears a gunshot, those instincts kick in. They might jump on the ground, they get scared, they may run, they may do any of those things. My daughter has adapted to that, and the only thing she can say is somebody got shot. That's what she correlates with gunshots, is somebody got shot. Not to jump and get on the ground, not to run. It's just, Mom, somebody got shot. And that is in no way a good way for a child to feel. So I really had to pay close attention and start talking to her and getting her to, let me know what she was feeling. Because in turn, when she was going to school, she started exhibiting behaviors based off of what she experienced in the neighborhood. And I will always get phone calls of she's acting up, she don't want to listen, and X, Y, and Z. But in actuality, my daughter only concern is getting her needs met in the classroom. She's not thinking about nothing else. She's in survival mode, because that's how she's been adapting in our community. She's adapting to surviving, living in a public housing community. So with all the things that children face, I think it's really good to pay attention to some of the behaviors that they're showing, because it's not always that they don't want to listen or they're just acting out. They are really protecting themselves from something, from whether it may be food insecurities, neglect, being subjected to violence in their communities. It could be a number of things. Brain plasticity. So in response to the image that I showed you a slide ago, the brain is plastic, meaning that it changes in response to what happened to it. The brain remains plastic throughout the lifetime. And even if someone experiences extreme neglect, through safe and healing relationships and activities that support regulation, it can help to change neural pathways in the brain. And new experiences widen neural pathways. And that could cause a significant change in a child's life, even an adult's life. They may be older, but it's still hope for them as well. And that brings me to resilience. When you think of resilience, what does that mean to you?
For For me, it would be the ability to bounce back.
Okay.
Yeah, bounce back came to mind to me too. Just rebounding, moving forward, getting over the hill or the mountain even. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the ability to heal from the trauma and unpack it and process it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, someone who said the ability to thrive despite trauma, and then learning to work with what you got. And there were some appreciations in the comments for thank you for sharing your story with us.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Being resourceful.
Yeah, healing and coping.
For me, the in our family we call resilience wearing the emotional slicker, so that when things come back at you and you may be triggered again or re-stimulated by some trauma that you've had in the past, that you can just let it slide right off and keep walking through the rain.
Okay. And all of those are absolutely right. Resilience is the ability to recover from traumatic events. And factors that can increase resilience include a strong relationship with at least one competent current individual, feeling connected to a positive role model slash mentor, and feeling some control over one's life. And question for everyone that's on this training right now, with the work that you do or even in your everyday lives, do you feel you participating in helping someone build resilience?
With the background in social work, then that is one of the things that I feel like I do daily.
As a paraprofessional, I know that for me, it can be as small as a child being conditioned to a hit and reconditioning them that I'm going for not necessarily a hug, but some form of positive physical contact versus an abusive contact.
Okay. That brings us to relationships. This plays a big part in someone building resilience. And while relationships are definitely essential, they come with complex trauma. If you encounter someone who's encountered physical or emotional abuse, and let's say they contact with someone that's always encouraging them, they're giving them compliments, and you may wonder why they're not receiving it well or they are pushing back at everything you say, it's probably because they feel you have an ulterior motive. Because in their mind, the normal for them is you ain't gonna ever be nothing. You don't do nothing right. So here comes this stranger that's telling them, oh, you're doing a good job. This is excellent. And they're really trying to figure out what you want. Because in their mind, it's nobody in their right mind sees anything good in me. If I'm at home in the one place I'm supposed to feel safe and I'm getting put down every chance they get. So building relationships with someone who's experienced complex trauma is very complex. It takes a lot of patience and a lot of persistence on someone's part to stick it out. And even when you do these things, by the nature of interventions, they may perceive you as a threat. As I stated before, they feel like you want something from them. You have an ulterior motive. And to create new neural networks, our intervention should be relational safety, regulation-based, rhythmic, rewarding, and repetitive. In order for these things to be effective and provide adequate healing, they should be done on a consistent and hopefully in all environments. And I know sometimes that's definitely not possible, but sharing another story with me, I realized that in order for my daughter, she has ADHD, in order for her to be successful, I had to play a part. I couldn't just place it all on the teachers or on the community. Me as her mom, I had to play a very big part in that, and we all had to be on the same page. It's not I'm doing something here at home and then she goes to school and she's doing something different. That's going to cause confusion and chaos, no stability. So I come to realize that that support and that consistency across all boards really makes a child feel safe. Even for me as an adult, that made me feel safe. So when you guys are feeling stressed or just aggravated, what are some things that you do to regulate yourself?
Sometimes for me, it can be as simple as a walk outside. It it when you get out from behind whatever four walls you're in, for me, going outside reminds me how big the world actually is, and that I'm not confined to that space of trauma.
Thank you. So we have dancing, working out, a deep breath for body scan, listening to music, walk, listening to music, get outside. And then we have someone else that's even saying walking, especially during the pandemic.
Okay. Some of the things that rhythmic activity includes drumming, music, chanting, breathing, bouncing a ball, dance, yoga, meditation, and art. And I know for my children, just being able to do any of those things helps to regulate them. My oldest son has autism, and music is his outlet. That is definitely his outlet. And I found that most children, they like to be active. They really do. And it really helps to regulate some of the things that they may be dealing with and going through. Additional things that promote regulation, safety, and security. Routine/rituals, being consistent, promoting kids' strengths, adults being mindful of how our own personal histories, judgments, biases can impact our actions, adults paying attention to their own window of tolerance, and adults' ability to acknowledge mistakes and repair relationships. I know for me as a parent, I found it awfully difficult to apologize to my children. I don't know if anyone has experienced that, but I know for me, I've really started the habit of apologizing to my children when I'm wrong. And I found that that helps them realize that, they do matter, their opinions matter, and it's not just your child, nothing you say is relevant, but it really makes them feel like they matter and what they have to say matters. And that adults can be wrong too. And I'm not done just yet. I wanted to go back to the case study And as you guys have been with me on this training and we've talked about ACEs, with all of the ACEs that Shelly Smith encountered, what do you think happened to her?
I don't know if I'm overthinking this, but will we need information about just the support that she might have had to see what resiliency was built up from the case?
Um, she received little to no support going through the beginning stages of that. Not until she was an adult did she kind of like branch out and begin to trust people.
Well, I think that if she got to the point of trust, then I think that she started to build some resiliency, because that would be a big hurdle to even get to the point of trusting people.
Hmm.
Did we have any other thoughts? Okay, so it says it's hard to know because everyone handles trauma in their own way.
Hmm. Definitely.
Can you please repeat the question, Tamika?
If anyone needs me to read the case study again, I can. Just wanted everyone's thoughts on what they think happened to Shelly Smith from the case study with all of the ACEs that she encountered and trauma that she experienced.
I'll just jump in. I think what I'm sitting with is, and I believe someone mentioned it in the chat too. It's hard for me to know, right? That it's really hard to know. Even as we hear about resiliency, when you look at all of the challenges that presented so early, and Shelly, even as a child, it's, in this moment, it's hard to even push through without knowing what those supports are. And I guess just personally, that's hard for me, even knowing that.
So, Shelly, she did go through depression. Shelly went through probably about a year or two of depression. Some thoughts of suicide. I became really close with her and doing my work. But Shelly Smith is me. Everything that I read, it's me minus the one child. I have four children. I'm a single mother to four children. One has autism. My daughter has ADHD. And I experienced all of those things, a victim of domestic violence. I watched it growing up and ended up becoming a victim, the incarceration, living in poverty, all of those things. But my resilience came from, huh?
But talk about a success story.
Thank you. And that brings me to, the point of these series. And I mainly do my work. I do it to share my story for parents to see that there's a way out, but also to everyone who does work in this area, whether it be social work, in the school system, community engagement, and whatever the case may be, that you guys matter. Even if you think you're not getting through to as many people as you would like, you matter. The work that you're doing matters. The phone calls that you guys place, whether it be for 1 or 2 minutes, it matters. Um, I felt like nobody cared about me. I always felt like everybody had an ulterior motive. because I never felt like I was going to be anything outside of a mother. I only have a high school GED, and I had no hopes. I didn't know who I was outside of being a mom until something just snapped in me, and I ended up going to Peter Paul Development Center, and I realized that they not only cared about just the child that I had attending that program, but they cared about my whole entire family, including me. So that work is really tremendous in building resilience in even one person. I ended up encountering a lot of good people at Peter Paul, someone I came to love and trust. And she put a little spark in me. She's on here. She don't like when I call her out, but Miss Adrian. She basically lit something in me, and from there, I just started experiencing so much awesome things in my life. I've been surrounded by so many wonderful people, and Scan gave me this opportunity to just share my story with everyone. And that's what I plan to do, to just let everyone know that no matter what type of trauma or resilience that you encounter, that it's people out here that care, and it's okay to trust.